Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about a new post that I found, basically by user named green underscore leaf. Basically says that I make 40,000 a year. How much should I spend on a new car? I'm a 30-year-old female currently driving a 2011 Toyota Camry SE. Pretty good condition, getting close to hitting 89,000 miles. Have it completely paid off. Um, would like to keep it for a few more years if I could, but I also do know that eventually I would have to get something new. If I were to get a new car, I would trade in my Camry along with paying down a payment of a few $1,000s. My credit is good and I'm working to build it. My necessary necessity payments per month, bills, grocery, gas, add up to about $1,000 to $1,200 per month. What kind of car would be affordable range for me, as I currently make 40,000 a year? Uh, in my own calculation, I think there are a lot of calculations, advices, numbers, and stuff like that, formulas out there. What I used when I bought my cars in the past, and then how I bought my house and stuff like that. And when I did the math, actually, it's funny. It worked out pretty similar to Dave Ramsey's math on buying a house. But in her case, because she makes $40,000 a year, according to my calculation, it's roughly about 270 a month. And I'll kind of explain in a little bit how I got to that number, which sounds very very low, very unrealistic in today's market and stuff like that. Same thing with the house, like housing expenses. Uh, Again, according to my calculation, is somewhere about 540 or so. Um, is according to my calculation for how much you can afford in the housing and stuff like that, which you can't buy a house at 540 a month. I mean, unless you're pretty much paying cash for the house. I mean, your tax and insurance alone is probably gonna run you there, especially if you have an HOA or something like that. You're pretty much toast. Um, so that kind of leads me to say, what you need is not really this and that, or cutting back on your expenses, cut back on Hulu, stuff like that. you know of course sometimes you need that, which is all good, and you can kind of do those, still focus on those. But really what we need to focus on is really increasing the income, right? If you say, hey, there's no house you can get, or even the rent, you can't even get a rent for that. I get that. I understand that. I'm I live here myself. Like I live in a place where, I have to pay for the housing, I have to pay for the cars, I have to pay for this and that bills. Thankfully, I didn't have to buy a car in so many years. But I read articles all the time. Basically says average car payments are like $700 per month, and I I literally sold cars for a living for years, and uh, $700 per month. I wasn't in the luxury line, so that number is just way too high for me. That's mind boggling. That's like, I think one of the most expensive cars that we had on the lot was like $50,000, brand new, SUV. It was big SUV, and it was more about like a performance slash like a luxury style car. So that's like the 45, $50,000 range, and depends on your credit and equity situation and stuff like that. I saw the numbers in the thousands, and I would cringe. It's like $1,000 per month, but most of the things that we were looking at is $400 or $500 per month, right? But those are not. Those are like point A to point B cars, and there's a lot of people that have had bad credit and stuff like that. They were upside down on their cars, and the car that they're trading in is like breaking down and stuff like that. They were in the shop for you know costing thousands of dollars. It wasn't safe for them to drive, and that sort of like that. Not like, hey, I want to get a car and I need to get a car just because it's got the latest technology or whatever, and I just like it, and I gotta pay $800 per month for it. This, to me, it's just that's a lot of money, especially if you're not making like $100,000 a year or more or something like that. But that's kind of like what I wanted to talk about is how do we get to the number? What works? What I think that works best for me and a lot of other people. Again, my number could be outdated, but that's what I wanted to talk about. And so, first of all, before I get into the numbers, though, is that her current situation, like she has a 2011 Toyota Camry with less than 90,000 miles on it. And there were a lot of comments about, oh, Camrys will last you forever, blah, blah, blah. Of course, I didn't sell, Toyotas, unless it's like, just came in as a trade or whatever. But, generally speaking, the notion is that the Camrys are pretty reliable cars. I had many cars. Unfortunately, Camry wasn't one of them. And in my experience, of course, you got to do your routine maintenance. You got to do your oil change. You got to do, wipers, brakes, tires, and stuff like that. Which, brakes and tires could get pretty costly, right? Because again, those are the, it takes a little bit of effort, labor, and stuff like that. It's not like getting new gas or getting oil change done. But outside of that, there aren't really that many routine maintenance you have to do. Sometimes spark plugs or something like that because they wear out, which again is not a huge deal, and it's not like you have to get that new one every so often. Whenever you just have a hard time starting the car, I guess you can look into it. But outside of that, it's not like it's a very, very fancy car where you have to do this and do that, on the vehicle to kind of upkeep, or there aren't that many gadgets that could go wrong on the vehicle, whether it's a Camry or an Elantra or whatever. I think there are a couple of other cars that people are mentioning, but I think these cars are really, really well made. I also used to be in the manufacturing side on the automotive as well, so I know like that these cars are again really, really well made. And so, I think you can, as long as you do your routine maintenance properly, these things will last you a while. Now, only one downside that I would kind of bring up. I'm not a mechanic by any means. I'm not an engineer by any means. But I've had two cars, like I said, with the issues. There were same issues that both happened at about 140,000 miles or so. They're both of them, and it was what they call timing belt. And I guess there's like within the in engine compartment, I guess there's like a belt that kind of like rotates around as you drive the car, and over time the belt, because it's a belt, it wears down and then it kind of breaks, right? And of course that will only wear out and break while it's in motion, and when the belt breaks, because it was rotating at such a high speed, it will break off and hit a component of the engine, and that will pretty much not only kills the car because now the belt's not there, the car's not turning, but also as it hits the engine, I guess it kind of causes the damage to the engine itself. And so in both of my cases on those cars, they both had belts and they both broke, and they were both quoted, like I think at that time, this is like 10 years ago, but they were quoted both about 4,000, like $4,000 and change for both cars, and neither of them were worth anything, because I bought them for pretty much that, maybe maybe not 4,000, but maybe a little bit more than that, and that's how it was. Now I don't believe that the Toyota Camrys actually come with the belts. I think they can come with a chain, which supposedly lasts forever, right? And so I don't think you have to worry about that there. And maybe that's why there are so many Camrys that goes on 200, 300, 400,000 miles with no issues and stuff like that. Again, I actually had never had a pleasure of owning a vehicle for that long with that many miles. Just because, again, I had two cars at 140,000 miles and they both broke because of the timing belt issues. I did have another one where I had I think it was close to 200,000 miles maybe, but had a transmission issue. No, it wasn't 200,000, but 100-something thousand miles. I had a transmission issue. And again, a couple $1,000 there, which wasn't worth it. Had a couple of car accidents and stuff like that. So instead of trying to fix it by spending $3,000, $2,000, whatever, I think I traded it in for another car and stuff like that. But regardless of it, generally speaking, whether it's a Camry, whether it's whatever else, nowadays, I do believe most of the cars are manufactured so well, so efficiently, so you know properly, right? That I think these cars should last that much more or more. Again, I'm sure a lot of mechanics will disagree, a lot of car fans will disagree and stuff like that. But the point of all of that is to say, hey, drive your cars until the wheels fell down, just because getting on your car, whether it's now or in the past or I'm sure in the future, is not cheap because you got to think about the car payment themselves, but also the routine of maintenance and stuff like that. And you're depends on where you live, but I'm sure in most cases the bank will actually have to have you have a full coverage insurance rather than of course in a 2011 Camry. I'm sure you only have a liability only. So unless you're paying for cash for the car and you feel comfortable enough where, if you hit somebody that you'll come out of pocket pretty much for your own car. It's a good idea to have a full coverage insurance, right? Just for the extra little bit, it kind of helps. But those are the things that you gotta kind of think about. And if something goes wrong with that new car too, I'm sure the parts that are more expensive, labors are probably more difficult to get just because of the complications with the hardware and software and stuff like that. So everything is more expensive when you get a new car. Now, the caveat side is that, is it safer to get a new car versus an older car, that sort of things. And is it more reliable to get a safer, newer car versus an older car? That's where I feel like I'm a little different than some of the other people. And maybe it's because I come from selling cars, but I do always talk about, when it comes to the finances and cars, I think you need to get something new car or like new car just because it comes with that warranty. That's again is additional cost and peace of mind for the borrower or the buyer of the said vehicle. Again, there could be, I've seen incidences where because I did this for a living. A lot of people are like, oh, it's a safe car, blah blah blah, and mechanics look at this and that and stuff like that. But that's true. Mechanics do drive it, inspect it and stuff like that, but they can't see everything. They can't know everything. It's not like they're pulling the car apart and taking a look at all that. They just can see what they can see by lifting the car up, looking in under, looking from the top and the bottom, driving around to feel if there's any kinks, while they're driving and the sort of things, which, tells a lot about the car. And maybe they will actually plug it into some sort of a diagnostic testings, stuff like that. But again, that's pretty much the extent of it, as far as a whole entire mechanical works are concerned, and possibly a little bit of electrical and stuff like that. So definitely, I mean, there's only so much they can look at by inspecting a car, right? But everything, behind that or after that is on your own. Once you buy it, you're on your own, no matter what they've tested, because they could always say, well, when I tested it, it was fine. It just went wrong afterwards, right? And so definitely get something with the warranty on it. Definitely try to get as newish as possible. And of course, the technology always also advances, right? So as you get the newer cars, with the better technology, the things are a little more also convenient, but also safer. Like having a backup camera definitely helps. Having a blind spot monitors definitely helps. Stuff like that. I'm sure the braking system gotten better. ABS systems probably gotten a little bit better. The traction control got better. Like there are so many other things that have changed over the years that makes things safer for the people that are in the car as you drive, or for the other people as well. I know there are some fancier cars where they adjust the brightness of the light, your headlight, because they actually see the oncoming traffic. So like if you're at a stoplight or as you're driving, if there's another car coming at you, they actually adjust the brightness of it for the other people. Things like that. There are again so many different technologies that are available that are more convenient but also safe and stuff like that. And I'm sure the sky's the limit when it comes to something like that. But for something point A to point B type of car, something again still more reliable, something that gives you a little more peace of mind, I think definitely helps. But as far as how I got to the number though, which obviously this channel is about. So it doesn't really give us a whole lot of the background and what it is. She does make a comment about she makes $40,000 a year. I'm gonna guess here to try to be conservative, and that is the gross income. So before the adjustment of the taking out the Social Security tax and all of that, so she actually brings home less than that. In this case, I use 70% of 40,000, right, which is $28,000 a year is a bring home, which means if you divide that by 52 weeks in a year, that makes it about 530 something, 540 a week, like bring home, which means if typically if you get paid bi-weekly every 2 weeks, that's about 1,076 a paycheck, 540 again a week. When I bought my cars and my house, my first home and stuff like that, the number I kind of wanted to like stick to was that I looked at, because I was in the commission, this is back when I was selling cars and stuff like that. The budget that I really wanted to kind of stick to was my take home, because like the gross income is great, it works for the banks and stuff like that when they lend you money and stuff, but that's not the money that you actually see, right? It's not the money that you touch. Yeah, you may get a tax return refund at the end of the year and that sort of things, but obviously you don't want to rely on that. That's not happening week over week, month over month. It happens once a year, right? And so your take home pay, right? And in my case, I had to look how much I made in the last couple of years and average it into it, because obviously you could have a good months, down months, and that sort of thing. When it's commission income. So the last couple of years prior to what I was doing, I took a whole yearly income, I can use whatever the percentage of that is your take home, and then I divided that by 52 weeks to kind of figure out how much I would be making per week. And what I told myself, and I try to stick with that myself, is what I bring home in a week is how much I feel like I could afford in housing payment. That's the weekly income bring home every week. And then I said the maximum that I can afford on the car payment, and even less than that, but maximum that I could afford, and my car payment would be half of that, right? So according to this calculation, $40,000 a year, $28,000 bring home, divided by 52 weeks, about 530 something a week, which is your housing allowance or housing payment, housing costs. And then again, half of that is about 270 for the car payment. So this way, what it allows you to do is that, you can, if you were to look at it, think of it as like a 4 weeks in a month, right? So what you bring in for the whole month, let's say for 4 weeks, 1 week goes to your housing, right? Because you got to have a roof over your head. And with the next half a week, what you work and what you bring home would be your car payment, which in most cases you got to have, right? You got to have a reliable transportation to go back and forth to work and stuff like that. And then the rest of the half, I guess you can use towards insurance and gas and of the maintaining the car itself. And then with the next 2 weeks, you can use it for utilities, living in general, speaking like that. And you may say, some people may say, oh, that's high. They may be high. It depends on your income and stuff like that. But what I've noticed and what I've learned over the years is that there's so much you can cut. I mean, you can't make your expenses zero. It just does not happen. Like, you got to pay for food at least. You got to pay for utilities at least. You got to pay for something, even if everything's paid for. Your house is paid for. Your cars are paid for. Let's say even if you got a solar panels that pays your electricity for free, and you're using well water and stuff like that, and you got a filter and all of that, it's all paid for, and everything is good to go. But you still have to pay for the internet. You still have to pay for the cell phone. Like, some people say, oh, I live, off grid, blah, 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 blah. But I don't know how well your life would be without internet. Not because of the entertainment, not because of this and that, but because that's a form of information. That's how you get, education. That's how you get everything, is that you got to have an internet. Basically, you got to have an internet. Maybe not a cell phone, but you gotta have, and also a cell phone too, just because you gotta have a ability to communicate with the outside world. You can't just live by yourself in the middle of nowhere. That's how we evolve from that to now. So I definitely think you gotta have that, and that's why, like, typically at some point, when you get to some point, I think try to putting down the cost, or lowering your expenses, and adjusting your lifestyle has a limit to it, right? And that's why. And then again, nowadays with the cost of living so high, I'm sure you can't find any homes around that price point, or the cars at that price point. Because I think when I did the math on a 6 years at 7% interest rate, I think it was like $15,000 loan. Let's see, 270 payment, 6 years. Let's say 7% interest rate. I don't even know what the car payments interest rate look like. But it comes out to be about $15,800 some dollars for the loan amount, which is $16,000. And I'm sure there are no cars you can get out there, a new car for around that price point. And even though she has to trade, I'm sure a lot of that's gonna go towards the tax and fees. She's got some money to put down. Hopefully she's got a couple of grand to put it down. But it also sounds like she doesn't have to buy a car right now anyways. But just to run some numbers and stuff like that, that's what it seems like is what she can afford. And I'm sure it's very, very difficult to find a car like that. But again, the point is, yes, at some point, I believe we got to try to increase our income. $40,000 a year is great as an individual. I think it's what is it, about an average, about a little bit plus or minus a little bit. But once you have that income, if you're able to kind of increase your income, obviously without adjusting so much on your expenses, you can still able to afford some other things. And of course, who doesn't like having a little bit more finances and have a little more freedom and have a little more choices and options, stuff like that. I think it's definitely helpful. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I went a little bit long today just because it's a topic of a car, in which, again, I sold cars for so many years, so it's just natural to me to talk about it. But I sorry, got a little long-winded. Hope this helps. Hopefully, that give you kind of a direction point on what to do, what to look for, how to get a car in that price point or the payment range that you can afford. Let me know. Share your thoughts, comments, concerns, and then talk to you soon. See you.